Hello everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on hybrid meetings, the best or worst of both worlds. My name is John Ferguson, Practice Lead for Globalisation, Trade and Finance at Economist Impact. We are now moving into a world of hybrid work. While many of us will enjoy being able to see our colleagues again, this style of working raises many challenges. Foremost amongst these relates to hybrid meetings. This challenge rests on the premise that not everyone will be in the main office, or any office for that matter, for every meeting. For some colleagues in remote offices, the pandemic has offered the opportunity to be on a level playing field with others. But now that we're moving to a hybrid working style, the core question becomes, how do we encourage equal participation and avoid remote employees feeling like bystanders? Joining me to discuss this really important topic are four great panelists. I will briefly introduce them now. First, we have Cynthia Burks, Senior Vice President and Chief People and Culture Officer at Genentech. Next, we have Gary Sorrentino, Chairman, Zoom CISO Council and Global Deputy Chief Information Officer at Zoom. Then we have Melanie Collins, Chief People Officer at Dropbox. And last but not least, Sanaz Ahari, Director, Product Management at Google Workspace. Now, with this great panel, I'd love to walk through a few questions and allow our panelists to share their insight. But I'd love to start first and foremost, before we get into any solutions or ideas or strategies that we might have, I really want to start with the challenges. And Melanie, maybe I can start with you first. In your personal experience, are hybrid meetings the best or worst of both worlds?
Yeah, thank you, John. So I think in a perfect world, we'd have a completely equal experience in meetings, and everyone would either be in a room together or everyone would be like on Zoom, for example. But as teams become more distributed, this may not be realistic. So just a little bit of context, Dropbox is virtual first, which means that remote work is the primary experience for our employees. However, we recognize there are still times when it makes sense to come together in person, right? As face-to-face connection is still really important to building healthy teams. So we're repurposing our offices, which we're now calling studios, by optimizing them for specific in-person gatherings like trainings, team meetings, and events. So in short, individual work is done remotely and teamwork is done in person. And a key principle of our strategy here is to maintain inclusivity and equity across our workforce. And having folks on Zoom during the lockdown actually really helped with that. One of the big pieces of feedback we received from our international employees during the pandemic was that it was a great equalizer for them, right? Since everyone was on a Zoom tile. However, once we start to return to in-person work, the truth is hybrid meetings aren't ideal, especially for if those who are dialing in are left feeling out of the conversation. But I hope that with advancements in technology, we can test and iterate on these experiences once we are able to gather in person. So at Dropbox, we're currently exploring experiences like Zoom Immersive View, right, or Zoom Smart Gallery. We're also working with virtual collaboration tools like Miro for whiteboarding. And again, we hope that as time goes on, technology will continue to ramp in this area and improve the experience. And since we don't have a lot of internal data yet about hybrid meetings, since our offices have largely been closed, our near-term plan is to avoid making very specific rules about them. And instead, we're focused on providing some high-level guidance to our employees and then surveying them on what works and what doesn't, so we can iterate our practices over time.
Interesting. Thanks, Melanie. Cynthia, can I bring you in? I mean, before we get to solutions, but are these hybrid meetings good or bad? Can they go badly?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I just appreciate being on this forward to learning from my fellow panelists. Honestly, I really think that hybrid meetings can offer the best of both worlds if they're managed effectively. If we go back to the basics, we know that the success of any meeting, whether you're fully remote, fully in person, or hybrid, really is dependent on how efficiently and how you organize the meeting, how you run it, the effectiveness of any technology that you're using, and ensuring, as Melanie mentioned, really ensuring that there's collaboration equity among the participants. So when a meeting is really done well, and this really comes down to leadership, it's inclusive of different styles of communicating, connecting, and collaborating. So for Genentech, we are part of the Roche organization. We're a global company. So hybrid meetings really aren't new for us. And I'm sure this is not unique for us. I'm sure other panelists have this experience as well. We've been hybrid time because we interact with our global colleagues who might be in different buildings, different cities, different time zones, different continents. So we've had to have hybrid meetings. And so we have a lot to experience to draw upon to ensure that we're successful in the future. At our organization, we're bio, and so we have a variety of different types of roles: scientists, people in marketing, HR professionals. We have people that are in our manufacturing facilities who are always on campus. So we will always have people who will need to be on campus, and others who have the flexibility to work remote full time of the time. So we really need to figure out how to make this work. And as we prepare to fully reopen our campuses, and we're targeting that for January of next year, remote work can be a choice for our employees. So we really need to get this right, and we really need to make sure that we know how to have hybrid meetings in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Cynthia. So without giving too much away, not every hybrid meeting that I've been in has been perfect, and some have been far less than perfect. But Gary, let me bring you in here. There can be, before we get to the solutions, there can be some challenges with these hybrid meetings, right?
There can definitely be some challenges. A lot of the companies now are starting to experiment with hybrid meetings because they're starting to open the front doors. More and more people are going into the building now and figuring this out. I think prior to the pandemic, we all had a bad experience on a meeting, and maybe hybrid was, I'm an East Coaster working for a West Coast company. I attend my executive management meeting. There are 11 people in a conference room. I'm the one man sitting on the screen, totally ignored, right? But back then, it was actually my problem because I wasn't I wasn't there physically, and it was more accepted, and we'd figure out a way to make it work as best as possible. I think during this pandemic, we learned a lot of things. We learned democratization of meetings. We learned equality. We learned that the technology got us to where we are today. And so I think when we get to this new hybrid world, or flexible, I really like the word flexible rather than hybrid. When we get to that new flexible world and people are deciding where they want to work, right? Whether it's that today my workload is better here, maybe it's not better there. One of the things we see is, yeah, it could really go off the rails, some of these meetings, but because companies have done a couple of things. Now, we're like very similar to everyone else. We're not basically open yet. We'll probably do something around January. So we're still enjoying the virtual world. I think all of us are basically not in a building today. So we're still enjoying a virtual world. I hate this what I'm going to say next, but on Zoom, everyone's head's the same size. Right? There is no, it wasn't like you used to walk into a conference room. My prior experience was Wall Street banks. You walk into a conference room. If the end seat on the table is empty, you first have to figure out where you are in the org chart, who else is coming to that meeting, and can you take that seat? And then while you're on video, you're looking at the back of everyone's head as they're all turning to talk to watch the senior person who's talking or articulating. I think going forward, companies really need to focus on this. And there's two parts to it. One, I work with companies all over the world who are increasing their technology in that office space. But what I don't want them to forget is you have to give the same technology to people who are working remotely, right? That's one of the first things to be equal. Please don't give the people in the office the ability to work on digital whiteboards, and don't give that to the people who are in the audience. As Melanie said, great for Zoom. We're looking at things like smart gallery. How do we actually take those people in the office and we break them up into several different slots? And then how do we make it so that, I like to call it this way, today's hybrid meeting is usually three. There's the meeting that's going on live. There's the whisper that's going on in the conference room. And there's the chat going on with the virtual. And how do we
Gary,
bring
I've never
that all
seen
together?
that. I've never seen that, Gary. I've never done those sides of the chats, Gary. Never.
But the goal is, how do we bring these together? And I know Melanie talked about Smart Gallery, and the second part is companion mode. And companion mode allows me to join the meeting as a participant, but not get rid of my video. I can raise my hand, answer a poll. So I think what the part here is, let's figure out how to make the technology equal. That's the first part. Second, don't forget, we have to teach people how to work in this new environment. Just don't teach them their job function. We've been doing a really great, and we got to where we are with little to no training, but we have to really make an effort to say, now that we're putting these new technology features in, and they're coming out fast and furious, how do we make people aware to make it so that the hybrid meetings are not horrible?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Gary. So Naz, I want to bring you in now and give you a chance. There's some really interesting points there from Gary and the other panelists too. But so Naz, from your experience, there are some challenges before we get to the solutions. I'm sure, you, like me, you may have been involved in some less than perfect hybrid meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I'll share some perspective, both from a Google perspective, as we've had this experience across our employees and across the company, but also for our customers that use Google Meet, and how we are hearing from our customers and what are the pain points that they see. A lot of things are quite shared. I will share that I am based in Washington, so I'm not at the Google headquarters. And for me, I have, firsthand experienced the value of the hybrid world, or actually, I should say, the more virtual world we have all been in during the pandemic. I feel like for the first time that I didn't have this deep anxiety of needing to be at the headquarters. Perhaps Gary felt it a little bit being on the East Coast and on the West Coast. But I do feel like there's been something really beautiful and powerful that a tile is a tile and everybody is equally represented. And of course, we've all learned that that wasn't sufficient and we've had to introduce new ways of participation. And so as you look at the new things that we have learned, in many ways, we have new etiquette that has been adopted in a very organic way. So similar to what Gary said, as we've introduced things like hand raise or polls or the chat or the Q&A, a lot of these things have been amazing because before the pandemic, we had all experienced being in meetings where you'd have to just speak up to be heard. And hand raise, I think, is just honestly the most beautiful feature. Everybody has a voice. At Google, it has been a complete organic adoption in terms of over time. It's been amazing seeing folks just respect it, that questions go in order of hand raise versus whoever speaks the loudest. However, there's also an important cultural aspect. So as we're thinking about going into hybrid, we've been super focused on collaboration equity as well. And the things that we have been looking at has been, how do we make sure that that participation equity of the things that we have learned with respect to people participating in different ways. Not every person is comfortable speaking up. Some folks want to raise their hand. Some want to do anonymous polls. Some want to participate in Q&As. There's many different ways of participation. And we know that we need to get the best out of everyone, regardless of how they want to participate. And some people don't even like having video. I think there's a lot of video exhaustion, actually. And so we need to respect everyone where they are, regardless of their location, regardless of their personality, introverted, extroverted, as well as, regardless of their time zone. And so we've been really invested as well in the companion experience. But also we have been publishing things around what we call kind of our hybrid work blueprints in terms of types of meetings. Because there is a very strong cultural aspect to meetings, because technology can honestly go so far. Things have to be adopted from a more cultural standpoint. For example, a company respecting hand raise is ideally something that is embraced by the leadership and kind of, seen people leading by example and a company respecting that overall. So we're looking at things like, what should a brainstorming meeting look like? What should an all hands meeting look like? What should a review high stakes meeting look like? And figuring out, how do we bring the best of our tools together? So for example, if we see that there's meetings where a group of people are participating together on an active document together. So for example, for those examples, we think it's actually best if people are in a Google Doc or in a Google Editor, and then we have an experience where meetings come into that experience. And that way you can have the full collaborative power of working together, but then you can still see each other, whether you're in a conference room or whether you're at home, so that you can still see each other. And so that's one of the things that we're keenly focused on, is
There's different types of meetings. We recognize the cultural aspect is really, really important. Of course, we have a responsibility in terms of what are the technology investments that we need to make, but there's also a very deep people aspect of it in terms of what is encouraged to actually make sure equity of collaboration indeed manifests itself.
Interesting. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Sanaz. Melanie, can I bring you back in? Just picking up Sanaz's point there are different types of meetings. And when we were preparing for this session and you started talking today, you're virtual first. I mean, it sounds like also that we have to think about these different types of meetings and how we structure them. And technology can provide a lot of great solutions, but from what everyone's saying here, that we also need to put in a lot of effort and time to try and think about how these options play out in different types of meetings as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, just taking a step back, the way that we were meeting before the pandemic wasn't exactly ideal either, right? Like having 8 to 9 straight meetings a day in an office was not ideal. And so we have a real opportunity now to really reimagine meetings in general, hybrid or not, right? So as an example here, we've adopted at Dropbox what we're calling core collaboration hours, which are 4-hour windows of time that are set for synchronous collaboration or meetings, and they're aligned to time zones versus anchoring to physical locations. And this is born out of a desire to try and curb some of the burnout that we have been experiencing pre-pandemic, and again, just being on video calls all day, right? And by holding all meetings within a shortened period of time, we can help ensure that the number of meetings doesn't get out of hand. And we create more space and time, right, for our employees to gain control over how they're spending their time in the meetings that they're attending. And I think, Sanaz raised a great point around just thinking through what, what to do with each different type of meeting, right? And giving guidance, raising awareness, right? Giving frameworks. Something that we've published, we have a virtual first toolkit, right? Which is sort of a listing of actionable insights to help teams work more effectively in a hybrid environment. We have a section on better meetings, right? So things like the 3Ds does the meeting address important decisions, debates, or discussions? And if not, maybe it's not worth having, right? Maybe it can be an email. Things like preparing agendas, right, that have clear goals and a short list of things to cover. Sharing reference docs in advance so people can prepare, add their input before a meeting, right? How to really streamline this experience. So definitely a number of things that we can do. And again, we're learning, right, as we go and continuing to sort of iterate our toolkit over time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melanie. Cynthia, I just wanted to bring you back in. I think when we were preparing for this, you were also talking about devices, and I'm just thinking about different types of meetings, preparations that Melanie and Sanaz and Gary have talked about. That there's a lot of effort that needs to be going in here. But I think you're also raising a point the other day about devices and how we can sort of equalize and share people's access to these meetings.
Yeah, I first of all, I love the comments, and I want to underline some of those key points I think that Sanaz raised around culture and also leadership. Let's be honest, a lot of meetings we don't really need to have. So going back to the basics around why are we in the meeting, what are we hoping to accomplish, and how can we avoid those meetings that Gary described where everyone, the people on the screen are looking at the back of someone's head. So one of the things that we're doing to really foster belonging and equitable experience for everyone is that we're making a few recommendations based on technology and just how we engage. So, one of the things that we're recommending to everyone, especially if you're in a virtual meeting, is everyone should use a laptop or a mobile device to join the meeting, even if you're in a meeting room, if you have virtual participants. So this way, if I'm on we can avoid those situations where I'm on the screen and I might be the only one. Everyone will be on a screen, even if there are some people that are physically together in one space. This allows us to continue with the hand raising, taking turns. It allows us to have better sort of brainstorming sessions where we can use some of the virtual tools that are available. And so no one feels, as Gary described, left out, or needing to figure out for themselves, how do I engage and how do I participate in the conversation? We're also, as our culture continues to evolve, really encouraging people to recognize different styles and approaches to meetings. Honestly, I am a true introvert, and in this experience, I have felt more powerful, have really felt my voice and myself differently in the virtual meeting. So we really are trying to recognize different styles and also just think about how we meet, why we meet, and ensuring that we have some of these best practices in place. I am really
Mm.
excited about additional technology that will come, but I do think that it's a combination of technology, but also just leadership and what is the culture that you're trying to reinforce and create to really make sure that this is successful for everyone.
Absolutely. And I do want to come back to leadership in a few minutes' time. But Gary, can I bring you back in? When we were preparing for this, Gary, you were talking about empathetic management strategies. And when I listened to Cynthia and this great panel talk about it's technology, but also all these other things, I wonder if this rings a bell with your view on sort of empathetic management strategies.
Well, yes. I mean, look, prior to the pandemic, there was an understanding. Everybody comes to the main building, and that's how we work, and that was for 97%. Now, going through the pandemic, our situations have all changed. Some of us have increased childcare, elder care. Some of us have moved out of region. And I think right now, in order to make this hybrid meetings and situation work, and I'm going to keep going back to the flexible work because I think it really should be called flexible work, is we need leaders to be empathetic, that to understand what people are going through. We've all been through a challenge, right? 21 months. This is the biggest business continuity exercise in the world. This was a challenge that impacted us, impacted our clients, and in some cases even impacted our families. We have families that are, the left side of the couch is my work spot, the middle of the couch is my child learning on e-learning, and the right side of the couch is my significant other, and that's our working environment. And so I think leaders need to be very empathetic about understanding what their employees are going through. They need to probably change the way that they're, and I'm going to use a word called manage. But I also think they need, besides empathy, they need to lead by example. Because it is not going to be good if the leaders decide that they're going to go to the office every day, and I see them there every day. They are not participating in the new flexible work environment. And so besides being empathetic, got to lead by example. This is the time to show us what the right things to do are, because we will follow our leaders in not only what they say, but what their actions are. And so I think leadership, hybrid's going to work. And while the technology will get us to a certain point, and I do believe the technology will get us to a certain point, but at a certain point, the technology needs to be transparent. It just needs to work, right? We shouldn't deal with the technology. We should be able to go to a conference room. It'll set up properly depending on the workload that we're actually doing. Things won't have to be, I remember sometime in the older days when someone had to present, it was a 10-minute challenge, right? Someone needed a cable. They had to go find someone from IT, right? The cable didn't even exist. We have to get through that now. And so the technology needs to really be transparent. It needs to make people successful on its own, because there is a technology divide. There are a lot of users out there who get technology very well. And that crowd has really decided how they want to work. And then there's another set of who has accepted the technology we have at home, but when we go back to the office, that technology might be a little bit more complicated. And so leaders need to understand that. And that's one of the things that we hang our hat on with training, because we need to put people on an even playing field, not just from a technology perspective, but for an understanding of how to use the technology. Look, we firmly believe leaders are going to be the answer to getting us to where we need to be. And they need to change a little bit from where they've been leading. I think they've done a good job changing during the pandemic, but all of us are leaders in our own way. And I think even we need to adapt, because I don't think anyone on this call has decided on how they're going to work and locked it in ink. It should have all been written in pencil, because when our users and our employees come back, they're still figuring out how they want to work. And so as we work at companies that have opened up all over the world in some fashion, the changes they've made from week 1 and 2 because the employees dropped off in week 3. 40% came in, 30% came in, 20% came in, 10% came in. Week 5, why are we opening the front door? They've learned so many different things, and leaders need to be empathetic, and they need to change the way that they're looking at their employees. But most important, they need to be flexible.
Interesting. And Gary, just to say that sometimes it still happens when we go into meeting rooms and the technology is not set up. So yeah, there's a ways to go at this stage. Melanie, can I bring you back in, please? You raised a great point the other day. How do these issues, these really important issues, how do they interact with the sort of diversity and inclusion agenda within our companies, which is obviously really, really important in its own right. But now we're also talking about hybrid meetings and trying to make people feel inclusive. So anything you can share in terms of how this interacts with that really important area?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, right? Many companies are leveraging remote or distributed work and hiring for the ability to sort of widen the lens on the talent pool, and this includes diverse talent as well. So if we're to achieve stronger diversity through remote teams, right, you'll be onboarding and developing diverse talent in a distributed way, which means we need to be even more aware of inclusivity, especially with things like hybrid meetings. So I think things like explicitly saying that you'd like to hear everyone's perspective, redirecting, right, when things go off topic, interrupting the interrupters, right, ensuring those who are quieter have a voice, using the hand raise feature. These are all sort of practices that we need to sort of adopt, right, as teams. And I think to multiple panelists' points, it starts with leadership, right, and ensuring that our leaders are role modeling, right, these behaviors, and they're really setting the tone to ensure that level playing field and that level of inclusivity in these types of meetings.
Absolutely. Cynthia, can I bring you on leadership too? Because that's something you were talking about the other day. Again, how important leadership is. Everyone's talked about it today, but from your perspective, it does sound like setting an example that Gary was just talking about. So many other things that leadership, whether it's one person or a group of people, should be thinking about here to sort of drive these meetings in the right direction, Cynthia.
Yeah, I'd like to actually connect to both Gary's comments and Melanie's comments because, as we think about what's needed for leadership, there is a huge opportunity now that I think is very unique. And we have an opportunity to really build from the experiences that we've been having over the past 18 months. So, in addition to some of those attributes that Gary mentioned, I would also say that we need leaders who trust their employees. We at Genentech, culture of transparency, integrity, and trust. But honestly, as we started to, experience, working remotely and other flexible work, we realized that some of our leaders didn't trust that employees would still do fantastic work, even if they couldn't see them. And so I've had leaders really very embarrassed to say, "Gosh, I realized I didn't trust my people." So there's another attribute here that I think we need to emphasize, which is around trust. The other one, and I think this ties to sort of this question or topic of diversity and inclusion, is the leaders being intentional. Someone mentioned, I don't remember who it was, that, before things weren't perfect either. And oftentimes people were not included or they weren't selected for projects or teams because they didn't have the same relationship with leaders that maybe others did. I know that some people are concerned that remote workers may not have that same face time that will lead to opportunities. But I think there's a real call for leaders to be intentional in their interactions with people, to really make sure that everyone has access to opportunities and really have an opportunity to thrive, especially those who have felt that they have a table. So again, I really challenge us. I challenge us as leaders, as HR professionals, to really see what is possible because we would have never imagined that this was possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Sanaz, can I include you because I realise I haven't asked you a question in a while, and everyone's reminded me how important it is to be inclusive here. But Sanaz, please jump in, whether it's the culture point, the importance of leadership, how we get over maybe there's a face-to-face bias, trust issues. Sanaz, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, amazing thoughts. I really enjoy hearing everyone's perspectives across the board. There's a few things I'll just add on in terms of things that we have learned at Google and things that, candidly, we still need to work through, whether it's just from a company culture perspective or whether it's just from a how do we have the right technology in place for Googlers and also for our customers. A few things I will say is as we have been looking at how do we make sure that everybody can participate in the ways that work for them in this new world, boundaries are really important. And one of the key things that we have been looking at has been things like can we let people have more downtime and focus time? So this is something that we have been investing in, for example, on Google Calendar. And there's been very healthy uptake of this. And the reason this is important is an interesting side effect of work no longer being a place is that our boundaries are different. You may be taking care of a loved one. I was homeschooling my very small kids for the first 6 months, and I had lots of blocks during core working hours that I needed to be with my little ones. And so what we realized is we needed to make the tools to empower our employees to be able to communicate their boundaries so that they can say, these are my core working hours, or these are times where these are my focus times, and I don't want to be in meetings. So that's been one very critical thing is work is no longer a place. And I do believe that in the future of work, we really want a global workforce that can work from anywhere. To do that, there's limits of physics. There's different time zones. There's different times of collaboration. Now that we have this kind of optional modality where some of Googlers can go back into the office, we have many customers that are in different variations of at home or within the office. We have small tools of just saying when you're in a calendar RSVPing, where are you attending from? And that can just be really helpful because then you can walk into a meeting and just be at least respectful, have the tools again to know, hey, half of my participants are at home. I need to be mindful of inclusion of those people and vice versa. One interesting side effect that we have actually noticed, we held a few fairly large scale kind of annual planning events, and they were around 100 people. And for me as someone who leads building our products, it's really important for me to use it and empathize with our customers. And we had a situation where, we were half in the conference room and we had 50 tiles from all the folks that were kind of, working from anywhere they choose to work from. And what was amazing is I had always been very worried about inclusion of the people that aren't in the office. And I feel like, that was certainly the case prior to the pandemic. But what was really fascinating and dawned on me was I actually felt that there was an inclusion problem for the people in the office. And it was honestly something that I had completely underestimated. And so that's another thing to keep in mind is that dynamic has actually changed in some ways. So back to Cynthia's point of the culture piece of everyone logs in with their phone is super important because you lose your representation equity. Audio is actually a really big problem when you think of participation equity. Technology has to be in the right place to know who is speaking in a conference room when there's 50 people in there, because 50 people on the tel may not know who is speaking, where is the audio coming from. All of these things are really important. And from a Google perspective, we're really focused on, sure, there's one end where you could have multiple cameras in a conference room and have very advanced technology to solve this. But to that point, actually, inclusion and equity is really important to us. And we know we also have to have a solution that's very accessible to all of our customers, because there's a very high cost to, super expensive setups that we could have in all of the different conference rooms. And so while we want to look at, kind of like both ends of the spectrum, it's really important that as we build our hybrid solutions, that they themselves are accessible to our, broad customer base and the global customer base that we have. And so solutions that just work with your phone or with your laptop are really, really important as we also innovate on the higher end. But I really loved hearing all the different thoughts that everybody shared. Definitely resonates with a lot of the things that we're thinking through and working through as well. And could not agree more that the role that leadership plays, it's so important, because all of this is really about human behavior that we really need to change in terms of how do we interact, and ultimately how do we get work done together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanaz. It's really, really interesting. Gary, can I just pick up this leadership point and the point about trust? I love Sanaz's example there of being with little ones and having time for work and time for home, so to speak. This is changing, and I'm optimistic about this, hopefully. But do you think it's changing fast enough? Do you think every company, maybe in every sector, maybe there are certain sectors that are not capturing this idea as strongly as we'd like? But this issue of trust, that you don't have to be in the office to be working hard to,
I don't know if it's working.
Is everyone getting this, Gary?
Yep. I don't know if it's working in every company or in every department inside of some companies. So I think what we're seeing today is you need flexible models even inside your own company, and you need flexible models if you're a global company across the globe. I was in the Middle East the other day, virtually talking, and they decided they're going to do a full back to office, a return to past normal. And so companies that have locations there will have to have flexible plans to figure that out. One of the things that we mentioned here was this asynchronous working. And I think that's where the leaders have to start understanding that our employees, they have to protect their time and they have to plan their day. But they need to be conscious of communicating that. Don't just be green when you're not green. Okay? It's okay to, like they said, it's okay to block out time for my time off, childcare. Those are acceptable items today, and leaders have to understand that. It also has to be that when you are on calls and you're in a hybrid mode, be visible, be present, be active in those calls. And I think part of that is, it is part about leaders accepting that. It's also about putting tools in place where we can work asynchronously. Look, I might not attend the meeting from 2 to 4, but I can add value to the whiteboard that was created. So when we have the meeting tomorrow, my value is already added there. And leaders now have to accept that it's not going to happen just in that 2-hour time frame. We are learning to work asynchronously. And global companies learned this a long time ago, because unless everybody stayed up late or got up early, we had to, I came from the financial world, pass the book, sort of say, to another country. And so we could do development in the United States and then pass it over to another country. And by the time you wake up tomorrow, it's like it had 3 days worth of effort put into it. Leaders now have to accept that is the norm, that people are going to want to work out of band from each other, and that they accept it and they understand it. And the other thing is, maybe don't question it. Understand that the flexibility has to be in the hands of our employees with guardrails, naturally with guardrails. But to say, look, we see companies who are saying it's hybrid, which means you have to be in work Mondays and Fridays for sure. We'll give you one day off. We don't trust that you're not going to work Mondays and Fridays if you stay in the virtual world. We need to change that. Leaders need to understand that I have a ball game with the kids on Monday. I'm going to take that time off. And the trust is really about, it's not about managing people anymore. It really is about managing their outcome and trusting that the employees that you have know their job functions, know the goals of the companies, know the outcomes that are expected, and measure them on that.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you so much, Gary. Everyone, we're coming to the last few minutes. I'd love to just give everyone a chance to sum up with one key takeaway. Now, we've covered trust, leadership, technological solutions, and so on. I mean, I've taken as many notes as I possibly can. But just in the last few minutes, I'd love to go around and just get one key takeaway, one final thought, if we can. Melanie, can I turn to you first, please?
Yes, thank you. I think the one takeaway that I have is that we're all sort of navigating this experiment at the same time, right? None of us have like the silver bullet answer. We're all learning and iterating as we go. And I think things like this, right? Panels, I think the more we can sort of come together to share what we're doing, the experiments we're running, the results of those things, the more transparent we can be with one another, right? The better, because we're all learning and we don't know what the future of work is. So my takeaway is just learning from the amazing panelists here. So thank you so much for your insights. Definitely things that I'll be incorporating, and really looking forward to seeing what you all do and how you continue to navigate this.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Melanie. Cynthia, one key takeaway for you.
Yeah, I think many of us would say we never could have imagined that we could stand up a remote workforce overnight in the way that many of us needed to. And so, as I think about that and think about the success that we've had and how productive people have been, despite some of the maybe biases or assumptions about how that could never work, it does make me wonder what else is possible that we're not thinking about. So, a key takeaway for me is to really encourage all of us to use this opportunity to ask bigger questions around how people work, what's important to them, and how do we really maximize people's contributions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Sanaz, last thought, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. The key things I'll share again, it's been wonderful hearing from everyone in the panel today. So thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts. I would say there's kind of three key themes for us as I look at it. It's around really work is no longer a place. Time is really more precious than ever. And in that context, the need for human connection is also extremely important. And so kind of with that lens, I think it's really, really important, as Melanie said, we're figuring this out as we go. There's completely new insights that we're going to learn as we go. And it's really, really important that we are very adaptive, as the world has shown that it can be resilient and adaptive during the past year and a half or so. And I think that's instructive for how we should look at this as we move forward as well.
Agreed. Thanks so much, Sanaz. Gary, last but not least, you've shared a lot, which I appreciate, but one last takeaway if you can.
So I would come up with three things. One, never stop investing in your employees. They're your best asset. Two, make sure we give them the tools that they need to continue. Or maybe there's four. Three, we're not going to get this right. Don't think we are. And it's okay to say I didn't get it right and pivot. That's what a company should do. And the last thing is never lose sight of the overall potential, because the overall potential is huge. And let's never lose sight of that's the goal, to increase the overall potential of our company, of our employees, making them successful, making the company successful. And as long as we keep imagining that the potential is huge, we'll get there.
Fantastic. Gary, everyone, I've really learned a lot. Hopefully everyone watching and joining us has been taking notes and learning as well. I think one of the key points is we need to keep learning. We need to keep talking. We need to keep innovating, hence this event. But let me just wrap it up by really, really thanking everyone. Sanaz, Cynthia, Gary, and Melanie. It's been absolutely fantastic. And for everything else, I hope you enjoy the rest of the event and take care of yourselves. We'll see you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.